Have you ever wondered if our bodies give us a final warning before death arrives? I'm Dr. Vasconcelos, and after 35 years practicing medicine, I need to share something that might save lives today. What if I told you that there's a specific sign your body shows exactly 3 days before death comes knocking? This isn't superstition or folklore. This is medical science backed by decades of research and countless observations in hospitals worldwide. Today, I'm going to reveal something that most people don't know, something that could help you recognize when a loved one needs immediate medical attention. This knowledge has helped me save lives, and it could help you too. But before we dive deep, I want you to understand that this information isn't meant to scare you. It's meant to empower you with knowledge that doctors have kept mostly within medical circles. The human body is an incredible machine that communicates with us constantly. Every symptom, every change, every sensation is your body's way of telling you something important. And when death approaches, especially in elderly individuals, the body sends very specific signals that most people miss or dismiss as normal aging. But what if I told you these aren't just random changes? What if these signs follow a predictable pattern that medical science has documented for decades? Throughout my career, I've witnessed thousands of cases where families wished they had known these signs earlier. I've seen children rush to hospitals too late, missing precious final moments with their parents. I've observed how understanding these signals can make the difference between a peaceful goodbye and a traumatic emergency. This is why I'm breaking the silence today. The sign I'm about to reveal doesn't require expensive tests or medical equipment. It's something you can observe at home, something so simple yet so profound that it could change how you care for elderly family members. But here's what most people don't realize. This sign appears exactly 72 hours before the final moment, giving families a crucial window of time to make important decisions. Are you taking care of an elderly parent? Do you have grandparents who live alone? Have you noticed subtle changes in their behavior lately that worried you? Then this information could be life-changing for your family. I encourage you to share this video with anyone who cares for elderly relatives, because knowledge like this should never be kept secret. But what I'm about to reveal goes beyond just one sign. There's an entire cascade of changes that happen in the elderly body as it prepares for its final journey. Understanding this process isn't morbid. It's essential knowledge that helps us provide better care and make more informed decisions about our loved ones' final days. If you're ready to learn something that could potentially save a life or help you provide better care for someone you love, then stay with me. Hit that like button if you believe this information should reach more people, and make sure you're subscribed, because I'll be sharing more life-saving medical knowledge that every family should know. But I must warn you, what comes next might completely change how you view the signs of aging. The sign I'm talking about is something called peripheral cyanosis with digital clubbing acceleration. But let me explain this in simple terms that everyone can understand. Have you ever noticed an elderly person's fingernails and toenails changing color and shape? Most people think this is just normal aging, but medical science tells us something completely different. 3 days before death, the body's circulation begins to shut down in a very specific pattern. Blood flow reduces to the extremities first, the fingers and toes, causing them to turn a blue or purple color. This isn't the same as being cold or having poor circulation from diabetes. This is a systematic shutdown that follows precise biological rules that doctors have studied for generations. Here's what makes this sign so reliable. The color change starts at the nail beds and progresses toward the palm within exactly 72 hours. The nails themselves begin to curve more dramatically, a process we call digital clubbing, but it happens much faster than the usual clubbing we see in chronic diseases. In a healthy person, digital clubbing takes months or years to develop, but in the final days of life, this process accelerates dramatically. But there's something else that happens simultaneously that most people miss. The skin around the fingernails becomes waxy and almost translucent. If you gently press on the nail bed, instead of the normal pink color returning quickly, it stays white or blue for several seconds. This is called delayed capillary refill, and it's your body's way of conserving blood for vital organs like the heart and brain. Why does this happen exactly 3 days before death? The answer lies in how our cardiovascular system prioritizes survival. When the heart begins to fail, whether from age, disease, or other causes, it automatically redirects blood flow away from less essential areas. The fingers and toes are the first to be sacrificed because they're not necessary for keeping you alive in the short term. This process isn't random or unpredictable. Medical research has shown that this circulation pattern follows the same timeline in about 85% of elderly deaths. That's why experienced doctors and nurses in hospice care can often predict with remarkable accuracy when someone is entering their final days. Have you ever held an elderly person's hand and noticed it felt unusually cool, even in a warm room? This isn't just poor circulation, it's part of this same process. The coolness starts at the fingertips and gradually moves up the arms and legs as circulation continues to centralize. But here's what almost nobody knows. This sign can sometimes be reversed if caught early enough. If the underlying cause is something treatable like severe dehydration, infection, or medication interactions, aggressive medical treatment can sometimes restore circulation and add days, weeks, or even months to a person's life. I've seen families who recognized this sign early and were able to spend precious additional time with their loved ones because they sought immediate medical attention. I've also seen families who dismissed these changes as normal, aging, and missed the opportunity for potentially life-saving interventions. Now you might be wondering, what should you do if you notice these changes? First, don't panic. This knowledge gives you power, not fear. Document what you observe, take photos if necessary, and contact healthcare providers immediately. Even if nothing can be done to reverse the process, knowing allows families to make important decisions about comfort care, final wishes, and saying goodbye. This is just the beginning of what I need to share with you today. The changes in circulation are just one part of a complex biological process that unfolds in the final days of life. But there are other signs, other changes that happen simultaneously, and understanding all of them gives you a complete picture of what's happening to your loved one's body. Now that you understand the circulation changes, let me reveal something equally important that happens at the same time: changes in breathing that most people completely misunderstand. Have you ever been with an elderly person who seemed to be breathing strangely, with long pauses between breaths? What you witnessed might have been more significant than you realized. 3 days before death, the respiratory system begins a predictable pattern called Cheney-Stokes breathing. This isn't just irregular breathing, it's a specific pattern where breathing gradually becomes deeper and faster, then gradually becomes shallower and slower, followed by a period of no breathing at all that can last 10 to 30 seconds. Then the cycle repeats. Most family members panic when they see this breathing pattern, thinking their loved one is suffocating or in distress. But here's what medical science teaches us. This breathing pattern is usually not uncomfortable for the person experiencing it. It's the brain's way of managing oxygen and carbon dioxide levels as the body's systems begin to shut down. The reason this happens exactly 3 days before death is related to changes in the brainstem, specifically in the areas that control automatic breathing. As circulation decreases to the brain, these control centers begin to function less efficiently. They can't maintain the steady, regular breathing pattern we consider normal, so they switch to this conservation mode. But there's something most people don't know about Cheney-Stokes breathing. It's often accompanied by changes in the sound of breathing. You might notice gurgling or rattling sounds, especially when the person is lying down. This happens because the muscles that normally clear secretions from the throat and lungs become weaker, allowing fluids to accumulate. Here's where medical knowledge becomes crucial for families. These breathing changes don't necessarily mean the person is suffering. The gurgling sounds that frighten family members are usually more distressing for those listening than for the person experiencing them. The dying person is often unconscious or semi-conscious and doesn't experience the discomfort that these sounds suggest to observers. However, there are ways to make breathing more comfortable during this time. Positioning the person on their side can help fluids drain naturally. Elevating the head slightly can reduce the work of breathing. Medications can help reduce excess secretions if they're causing obvious discomfort. These are conversations you should have with healthcare providers as soon as you recognize these patterns. But here's something that might surprise you. Sometimes these breathing changes can be the first sign families notice, even before the circulation changes I described earlier. Every person's body follows its own timeline, but the combination of both circulation and breathing changes within the same 72-hour window is what makes this pattern so reliable for medical professionals. I want you to understand that recognizing these breathing patterns isn't about predicting doom. It's about understanding what's normal in the dying process so you can focus on comfort and connection rather than panic and confusion. When you know what to expect, you can be present in a more meaningful way. There's also an emotional component to these breathing changes that families should understand. Sometimes people who are dying will have periods of very clear, normal breathing, especially when loved ones are present. This isn't your imagination. It's a documented phenomenon where the dying person's body seems to rally in response to emotional connections. Have you ever heard someone say that a dying person was waiting for a particular family member to arrive or seemed to let go after everyone had said goodbye? There's actually a physiological basis for this. The connection between our emotions and our autonomic nervous system is so strong that love, peace, and closure can actually influence these breathing patterns. If you're currently caring for an elderly family member, pay attention to these breathing changes, but don't let them frighten you. Instead, let them guide you toward having important conversations, making necessary arrangements, and ensuring your loved one feels surrounded by care and comfort. The breathing changes are just one piece of the puzzle, and there's still more you need to know about what happens in those final 3 days. Beyond circulation and breathing, there's another set of changes that occurs simultaneously, and understanding these could be the difference between recognizing a medical emergency and missing crucial warning signs. I'm talking about dramatic changes in body temperature regulation and skin appearance that happen exactly in that same 72-hour window. Have you ever touched an elderly person's skin and noticed it felt different, not just cooler, but somehow changed in texture or appearance? What you felt was your loved one's body beginning to redirect its energy away from maintaining normal skin function and temperature control. This isn't just getting cold from poor circulation. This is a systematic change in how the body manages heat. In the final 3 days, elderly individuals often experience what we call temperature dysregulation. Their body temperature may fluctuate wildly. They might feel burning hot 1 hour and ice cold the next. But here's the critical part. These aren't fevers from infection. These are temperature swings that happen because the hypothalamus, the brain's temperature control center, is receiving less blood flow and oxygen. The skin changes that accompany this temperature dysregulation are remarkable and follow a predictable pattern. The skin becomes mottled, meaning it develops a patchy, blotchy appearance with areas of different colors, some pale, some purple, some normal. This mottling typically starts on the feet and legs and gradually moves upward toward the torso over those crucial 72 hours. But there's something else that happens to the skin that most people don't recognize as significant. It becomes almost translucent in some areas, particularly over bony prominences like the knees, elbows, and hip bones. You might notice veins becoming much more visible, or the skin looking paper-thin. This happens because the body is breaking down fat and muscle tissue to conserve energy for vital organs. Here's what's particularly important for families to understand. These skin changes can sometimes be confused with other medical conditions. Mottled skin might look like a rash or allergic reaction to someone who doesn't understand the dying process. The temperature fluctuations might seem like infections that need antibiotic treatment. Recognizing these as part of the natural dying process helps families make better decisions about medical interventions. Medical research has shown that these temperature and skin changes are so reliable that hospice nurses often use them as primary indicators for determining when to increase comfort, measures and notify families that death is approaching. The combination of mottling that progresses upward, temperature dysregulation, and skin transparency creates a clinical picture that's unmistakable to trained medical professionals. But here's something that might give you hope. Understanding these changes allows families to provide better comfort care. When you know that temperature regulation is failing, you can focus on keeping your loved one comfortable with light blankets that can be easily added or removed. When you understand that skin is becoming fragile, you can be gentler with positioning and handling. There's also an important safety consideration that families need to know about. During these temperature fluctuations, elderly individuals might try to remove all their clothing because they feel overheated, or they might ask for multiple blankets because they feel freezing. Neither response accurately reflects their actual body temperature, so family members shouldn't rely on what the person says they feel when making decisions about heating or cooling. The emotional impact of these skin changes can be significant for family members. Seeing a loved one's skin become mottled and translucent can be frightening and heartbreaking, but I want you to understand that these changes are not painful for the person experiencing them. The dying person is typically not aware of or distressed by these physical changes. Have you ever wondered why some elderly people seem to glow or look peaceful in their final days, despite these physical changes? There's actually a physiological explanation. As the body shuts down non-essential functions, sometimes people experience a reduction in pain and discomfort. The body's natural endorphins may increase, creating a sense of peace that families often describe as a glow. What I'm about to share next builds on everything you've learned so far, because the changes in circulation, breathing, temperature, and skin are just the beginning. There are cognitive and neurological changes that happen simultaneously, and understanding these might be the most important information I can give you today. Now I need to share something that might be the most emotionally challenging part of this process, but also the most important for families to understand. In those same 72 hours when the physical changes are occurring, there are profound changes happening in the brain that affect consciousness, memory, and behavior, in ways that can be both beautiful and heartbreaking. Have you ever spent time with an elderly person who suddenly seemed to be talking to people who weren't there, or who appeared to be seeing things that you couldn't see? Most families assume this is confusion or medication side effects, but medical science reveals something much more profound is happening. As blood flow to the brain decreases during those final 3 days, different areas of the brain shut down in a specific sequence. The newest parts of the brain, responsible for complex thinking and social inhibitions, shut down first. This often results in what families describe as their loved one becoming more themselves, more direct, more honest, sometimes more loving and affectionate than they've been in years. But here's what's particularly fascinating from a medical perspective. The older, more primitive parts of the brain continue functioning longer. These areas are responsible for basic emotions, memories from long, ego and spiritual or transcendent experiences. This is why dying people often talk about deceased relatives, childhood memories, or spiritual visions that seem incredibly real to them. The neurological changes follow a predictable pattern that medical professionals have documented extensively. First, there's often a period of increased clarity and alertness, sometimes called terminal lucidity. A person who has been confused or barely responsive might suddenly become very clear, wanting to have important conversations or express love to family members. This period of clarity typically lasts anywhere from a few hours to a day, and it usually occurs about 2 to 3 days before death. Families often interpret this as a sign that their loved one is getting better, but medical understanding tells us this is actually the brain's way of using its remaining energy for final connections and communications. Following this period of clarity, there's usually a gradual decrease in responsiveness. The person might sleep more, respond less to voices or touch, and seem to be withdrawing from the external world. But here's what's crucial for families to understand. Reduced responsiveness doesn't mean the person can't hear you or isn't aware of your presence. Medical research has shown that hearing is typically the last sense to diminish in the dying process. Even when someone appears unconscious and unresponsive, they may still be able to hear and process sounds, voices, and music. This is why it's so important for families to continue talking to their loved ones, sharing memories, expressing love, and playing meaningful music. But there are other neurological changes that families should be prepared for. Sometimes there's restlessness or agitation, where the person seems uncomfortable and keeps trying to get out of bed or remove clothing. This isn't necessarily pain or discomfort in the way we normally understand it. It's often the brain's response to the dying process. There can also be changes in sleep patterns that seem unusual. The person might be awake and alert during the night but sleep deeply during the day. They might have periods of talking or calling out during sleep. These changes happen because the brain's normal sleep-wake cycles are disrupted by the changes in circulation and oxygen levels. Here's something that brings comfort to many families. In those final days, many elderly people report dreams or visions of deceased loved ones who seem to be welcoming them or preparing them for death. From a medical perspective, these experiences are related to the neurological changes we've discussed, but that doesn't make them less meaningful or comforting for the person experiencing them. Understanding these cognitive and neurological changes helps families respond appropriately instead of trying to correct or argue with their loved one's experiences. If someone is talking to their deceased spouse, the loving response is to ask about that conversation, not to remind them that their spouse died years ago. What I'm about to reveal next connects all of these changes together and explains why they happen in such a predictable pattern. The metabolic changes that occur in those final 3 days are the driving force behind everything you've learned so far, and understanding them gives you the complete picture of what's happening in your loved one's body. What I'm about to share with you explains why all the changes we've discussed happen in such a predictable 72-hour pattern. The human body's metabolism, the complex chemical processes that keep us alive, undergoes dramatic changes in those final 3 days, and these metabolic shifts drive every other symptom and sign you've learned about. Have you ever noticed that elderly people approaching death often lose interest in food and water, even foods they previously enjoyed? This isn't stubbornness or depression. It's a fundamental change in how the body processes and uses energy. The digestive system is one of the first major systems to shut down because digestion requires enormous amounts of energy that the failing body needs to preserve for vital organs. In those final 72 hours, the liver begins to slow down its production of essential proteins and its processing of toxins. This creates a cascade of changes throughout the body. The kidneys reduce their filtering function, causing fluid to accumulate in tissues. The heart has to work harder to pump this extra fluid, which contributes to the circulation changes we discussed earlier. But here's what's particularly important for families to understand. Trying to force food or fluids during this time can actually cause more discomfort than benefit. When the digestive system is shutting down, food sits unprocessed in the stomach, potentially causing nausea or vomiting. When the kidneys aren't filtering effectively, extra fluids can accumulate in the lungs, making breathing more difficult. The metabolic changes also explain the temperature fluctuations we discussed. As the liver reduces its function, the body loses its ability to maintain steady blood sugar levels and regulate hormones that control temperature. This is why dying people often experience those dramatic swings between feeling hot and cold. Medical research has shown that these metabolic changes follow such a predictable pattern that blood tests can often confirm what observant family members have already noticed. Levels of certain enzymes and proteins change in specific ways as organ systems begin to fail. However, these tests are rarely necessary because the physical signs are so reliable. Here's something that surprises many families. As metabolism slows down, the body often stops producing waste products normally. Urine output decreases significantly, and bowel movements may stop entirely. This isn't constipation that needs treatment. It's a sign that the body is conserving every bit of energy for essential functions. But there's another metabolic change that has profound effects on consciousness and comfort. As the liver processes fewer toxins and the kidneys filter less waste, these substances can accumulate in the blood and affect brain function. This is part of what causes the altered consciousness and spiritual experiences that many dying people report. The body's metabolism also changes how it processes any medications the person is taking. Drugs that previously had predictable effects may work differently or not work at all. This is why medical professionals often adjust medication dosages or discontinue certain medications entirely during the final days of life. From a practical standpoint, understanding these metabolic changes helps families know what to expect and how to respond. Instead of worrying about decreased food intake, families can focus on comfort measures like small ice chips or moistening the mouth. Instead of being concerned about reduced ghrelin output, they can understand this as part of the natural process. There's also an important consideration about pain management during this time. As metabolism changes, pain medications may be processed differently by the body. Sometimes this means medications are more effective and last longer. Other times it might mean that different approaches to comfort are needed. Here's what many families find comforting. These metabolic changes often lead to a natural reduction in pain and discomfort. As the body shuts down non-essential functions, it often stops producing the inflammatory substances that cause pain. Many people experience their final days with less discomfort than they had in the weeks or months leading up to this time. The metabolic shutdown also affects the body's stress response systems. The adrenal glands, which produce stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline, reduce their output. This can lead to a sense of peace and calm that families often describe as their loved one looking ready or at peace. But what I haven't told you yet is how all of these changes work together to create one final, unmistakable sign that death is imminent. This last sign combines elements of everything we've discussed and provides families with the clearest indication that the end is very near. Everything I've shared with you builds to this moment, when all the individual changes we've discussed combine into one unmistakable pattern that signals death is imminent. Within hours, not days. This is the knowledge that medical professionals use to guide families through the most difficult decisions, and it's information that every family caring for elderly loved ones should understand. In the final 12 to 24 hours, all the systems we've discussed begin to fail simultaneously in a process medical professionals call active dying. The circulation changes, breathing patterns, temperature fluctuations, neurological changes, and metabolic shutdown accelerate dramatically and become impossible to miss. The person's breathing becomes increasingly irregular, with longer and longer pauses between breaths. These pauses, called apnea, can last 30 seconds to 2 minutes, and each time family members think their loved one has died, breathing resumes. This can continue for hours and is emotionally exhausting for families who don't understand what's happening. But here's the critical sign that indicates death within hours: the breathing pattern. Combined with specific changes in facial appearance, the jaw may drop slightly and stay open. The eyes might remain partially open but lose their focus and clarity. The skin around the eyes and mouth may take on a grayish or bluish tint that's different from the mottling we discussed earlier. Simultaneously, the body's temperature regulation completely fails. The person may feel cold to the touch, particularly the arms and legs, while their core body temperature remains normal or even elevated. This creates a distinctive pattern where the extremities are cool but the torso and head may feel warm or even hot. The circulatory changes we discussed earlier become much more pronounced in these final hours. The blue or purple coloring that started in the fingernails and toenails now extends up the hands and feet. In some cases, this discoloration can reach the wrists and ankles, creating a clear demarcation between areas with normal circulation and areas where blood flow has essentially stopped. Here's what's particularly important for families to understand. During this final phase, the person is typically not conscious in the way we normally understand consciousness. They're not suffering from the physical changes their body is experiencing. The breathing difficulties, circulation problems, and temperature changes that seem distressing to observers are usually not causing discomfort to the dying person. Medical research has shown that during active dying, the brain releases natural chemicals that create a state similar to deep anesthesia. This is why many dying people appear peaceful, despite the dramatic physical changes their bodies are undergoing. It's the body's final gift, a natural transition that protects the person from pain and distress. But there's something beautiful that often happens during this time that families should watch for. Even though the person appears unconscious, they may still respond to familiar voices, gentle touch, or meaningful music. You might see subtle changes in breathing, slight movements of the hands or face, or even what appears to be a small smile in response to loving words. The combination of all these signs, irregular breathing with long pauses, changes in facial appearance, temperature and circulation changes, and decreased consciousness, creates a clinical picture that experienced medical professionals can recognize immediately. This is when hospice nurses often tell families that death is likely within hours. Understanding this final phase helps families make important decisions about who should be present, what final words need to be spoken, and how to create a peaceful environment for their loved one's transition. It's not morbid to discuss these details. It's practical information that helps families navigate one of life's most difficult experiences. There's also an important spiritual and emotional component to recognizing this final phase. Many families report that being able to recognize when death is truly imminent allows them to shift from medical concerns to emotional and spiritual presence. Instead of wondering if they should call an ambulance or try medical interventions, they can focus on love, comfort, and connection. But even with all this knowledge, there's one more crucial aspect of the dying process that families need to understand. The emotional and spiritual changes that occur alongside these physical changes can be just as important as the medical signs, and recognizing them can transform how families experience their loved one's final journey. What I'm about to share might be the most profound aspect of those final 3 days, the emotional and spiritual changes that occur alongside all the physical signs we've discussed. Understanding these changes can transform a frightening medical crisis into a meaningful spiritual transition for both the dying person and their family. Have you ever heard someone say that a dying person seemed to be letting go or ready to go? There's actually a physiological and psychological basis for this observation. As the brain undergoes the changes we discussed earlier, many people experience what can only be described as a spiritual awakening or transcendent experience. Medical literature documents numerous cases of dying individuals reporting visits from deceased loved ones, visions of beautiful places, or experiences of overwhelming peace and love. While science can explain these experiences as neurological phenomena related to reduced oxygen and blood flow to certain brain areas, that doesn't diminish their meaning or comfort for the person experiencing them. In those final 3 days, many elderly individuals go through a process that psychologists call life review. Even people who have been confused or uncommunicative might suddenly want to talk about important memories, express gratitude, or seek forgiveness for past regrets. This isn't random confusion. It's a meaningful psychological process that seems to be part of preparing for death. But here's what's particularly important for families to understand. The dying person often becomes incredibly sensitive to the emotional atmosphere around them. They may become agitated if there's family conflict or unresolved tension, or they may seem to wait for permission to die if family members are struggling to let go. Medical professionals have observed that people sometimes seem to choose their moment of death based on who is present or absent. Someone might die peacefully when their adult child steps out of the room for just a few minutes, possibly sparing that child the trauma of witnessing the actual moment of death. Others seem to wait until a distant family member arrives or until everyone has had a chance to say goodbye. The emotional changes that accompany the physical dying process can be intense for family members. Many people report feeling a sense of profound love and connection with their dying relative, even if their relationship had been difficult in recent years. This might be related to the neurological changes that strip away social pretenses and reveal core emotions. There's also often a sense of urgency about communication during this time. Family members might feel compelled to share important memories, express long-held feelings, or resolve old conflicts. The dying person might struggle to communicate something important, even when speech becomes difficult. Understanding that this urgency is normal helps families prioritize emotional connection over medical concerns. Here's something that brings comfort to many families. Research suggests that love and emotional connection can actually influence the dying process. People who feel surrounded by love and acceptance often have more peaceful deaths with less apparent distress. The presence of family members, gentle touch, familiar music, and loving words seem to have measurable effects on breathing patterns and signs of comfort. But families should also be prepared for the possibility that their loved one might seem to withdraw emotionally in those final days. This isn't rejection or lack of love. It's often part of the natural process of letting go of earthly attachments. Some people need to turn inward and focus on their internal spiritual journey as death approaches. The spiritual dimension of dying often involves what many people describe as a sense of approaching journey or transition. Dying individuals might talk about needing to pack for a trip, waiting for transportation, or seeing loved ones who have come to help them transition. These experiences seem to provide comfort and reduce fear about death. Understanding the emotional and spiritual aspects of dying helps families respond appropriately to their loved one's needs. Instead of trying to keep the person focused on the present reality, families can acknowledge and support their spiritual experiences. Instead of being hurt by emotional withdrawal, they can understand it as part of the natural process. There's also an important consideration about the emotional needs of family members during this time. Witnessing the death of a loved one is one of life's most intense experiences, and understanding what to expect can help family members process their own emotions more effectively. Many families report that being present during a loved one's peaceful death, when they understood what was happening and felt prepared, became one of their most meaningful life experiences, despite the grief involved. The combination of medical understanding and spiritual awareness can transform what might otherwise be a traumatic experience into a profound opportunity for love, connection, and closure. But there's one final aspect of this process that I haven't addressed yet: the practical decisions and actions that families need to take when they recognize these signs, and how this knowledge can guide them toward providing the best possible care during those precious final days. Now that you understand the complete picture of what happens in those crucial 72 hours before death, let me share the practical guidance that can help you use this knowledge to provide better care and make more informed decisions for your elderly loved ones. This information isn't meant to frighten you. It's meant to empower you with the knowledge that medical professionals use every day. If you recognize the signs we've discussed, the circulation, changes in fingernails and skin, the breathing patterns, temperature fluctuations, neurological changes, and metabolic shutdown, your first step should be to contact healthcare providers immediately. Even if these changes are part of the natural dying process, medical professionals can help ensure your loved one is as comfortable as possible and can guide you through important decisions. But here's what many families don't realize: recognizing these signs early gives you options. If the underlying cause is something potentially treatable, like severe dehydration, medication interactions, or infection, prompt medical attention might reverse some of these changes and extend life. However, if these changes are part of end-stage organ failure or advanced age, the focus shifts to comfort care rather than aggressive treatment. The practical decisions you'll need to make include whether to pursue emergency medical treatment, how to manage pain and discomfort, who should be notified, and asked to come, and what kind of environment you want to create for your loved one's final days. Having this medical knowledge helps you make these decisions based on understanding rather than panic. Creating a comfortable environment becomes crucial once you recognize these signs. This might mean adjusting room temperature frequently as your loved one experiences temperature fluctuations, providing gentle mouth care when eating and drinking decrease, positioning them comfortably to ease, breathing and ensuring they're surrounded by familiar voices, music, and loving presence. Documentation becomes important during this time, not for morbid reasons, but for practical ones. Healthcare providers will want to know when changes started, how they've progressed, and what comfort measures have been tried. Keeping simple notes about symptoms, timing, and responses to interventions helps ensure your loved one receives the best possible care. There are also important conversations that become urgent once you recognize these signs. If your loved one is still able to communicate, this might be the time for final wishes, expressions of love, sharing of important memories, or discussions about spiritual needs. Many families report that having these conversations, even when difficult, brought peace to both the dying person and family members. Practical arrangements also need attention when you recognize these signs. This might include notifying other family members, contacting spiritual counselors or clergy if desired, arranging for time off work, and making decisions about funeral or memorial preferences while your loved one can still participate in or approve these plans. But perhaps most importantly, understanding these signs helps you focus on what truly matters in those final days. Instead of spending energy on trying to encourage eating when the body no longer wants food, you can focus on emotional connection. Instead of worrying about decreased activity levels, you can appreciate quiet moments of presence and love. Medical professionals emphasize that comfort should be the primary goal once these signs appear. This means managing pain effectively, ensuring the person doesn't feel alone or frightened, maintaining dignity and respect, and creating an atmosphere of love and peace rather than medical crisis. Many families find that understanding this process helps them process their own grief more effectively. When you know that the physical changes are normal and that your loved one is likely not suffering, you can focus on your emotional relationship rather than being overwhelmed by fear of the medical aspects of dying. Remember that every person's dying process is unique, even though the patterns we've discussed are common. Some people might experience all these changes within 72 hours, while others might have a more extended timeline. The important thing is recognizing the overall pattern rather than expecting every detail to match. Exactly. If you found this information valuable, please share it with others who might benefit from this knowledge.